Welcome to Beyond the Glory with me, John Walland, the podcast where big names become real people. Join me as we peel back the curtain on sporting legends, their wins, their wounds, and the stories they've never told. This is where heroes get human. Absolutely proud to be joined by a rugby legend extraordinaire, the one and only Naas Botha. Naas, thank you very much for joining me on Beyond the Glory today. Good to catch up with you. You're looking good. Look like you could go back and don that number 10 jersey and wear it with pride and get the job done. How are you doing?
I'm very good, and thanks for the invitation, John. Firstly, yes, I think I might be able to put the jersey on. But doing the job at the moment, I don't think that's realistic. Okay, so it's only I'll stick to wearing the jersey, but we've got enough excellent fly-offs that's doing the job. So I'm like you, John, and
Yes.
I keep watching you every week when you support your local team, your Lions
Yes.
in your Lion jersey. I'm one of those guys. I'm a
Yes.
supporter as you are.
I like that. Yeah, absolutely. And I tell you what, it's just incredible how you, over the years and years, are so passionate about the game. And it was such a privilege to be able to. I need to just get back onto my camera. Hold on. You know, it was
There you
just
go.
an absolute privilege to catch up with you at the recent Gary Player, Vivian Player Invitational up at Sun City, and just how knowledgeable you are in terms of the game. I mean, when we look back to many, many years ago when you first donned the green and gold, you've kind of just kept abreast with what's going on and really monitoring the game and loving it and an absolute excellent critic of the game as well, Nas.
John, I believe that the most important thing is I'm just crazy about talent, put it that way.
Yeah.
I love watching guys that's got talent. Doesn't matter if it's cricket or soccer or rugby, anything. You know, and I think that's why, okay, but Supersport also kept me intact with the game for 30 years plus. So that was, I think I was extremely fortunate. You know, a lot of good guys played the game, and then it's not because of them, but they sort of go a little bit or they disappear slightly. Where Supersport and that all actually kept me really intact with the game, if I can put it that way. And the most important thing is I just loved analyzing the game in such a way. I want to figure out why is John doing this? Why is John better than the next guy? Why is John thinking the way he's thinking? And I think I just fell in love with that, to try and always figure out something that's different. You know, and then with the viewer, I just hope for over 30 years, I brought something different to the table, if I can put it that way, in the sense that you might have missed something, or a lot of supporters just look at the game, and with one or two things that, you know, I picked up, just making you a little bit looking at the next game slightly different, thinking about the game a little bit more. So I think that's why I'm sort of a little bit crazy about the game as such. But to be honest, I'm just crazy about all sport. From golf, you know, you were there last weekend with the Gary Player and Vivian, and you know, their foundation. And I played with Jaco Prinsloo, absolute fantastic golfer. You can't believe what a good golfer he is, and how easy it's for them to come out of a difficult lie. And we're in the middle of the fairway, and the next moment we're in a difficult lie from the middle of the fairway, you know. And it just
Yeah.
shows you that's why they called professional golfers, and we the hackers.
Yeah. You know, it was so interesting in your four ball. You speak about Jaco Prinsloo, the professional golfer. There were two other guys there that really intrigued me, and I can't remember their names. I know that the one gentleman was a representative for Rolex, and his next door neighbor, a German guy. You know what was so interesting, and they must have actually conveyed this to you, Nas, because they chatted about how they lived together for 10 years. And they used to look over the fence. They saw their neighbors during COVID. They got to speak for the very first time after 10 years of a neighbor over the wall, and then became friends and now amazing golfing partners. I mean, a lovely story, isn't it?
Yeah, but the most amazing thing is what made them friends. Sport.
Yes.
And we've seen in 95 how sport can unite a nation. We saw that. We were all part of it. And then again in 2007, and then 2019 and 2023. And the way it's going on at the moment, the women's cricket, I thought did a fantastic job in Asia. Bafana is looking good. It's like South Africa is on a high with their sport at the moment. It's absolutely amazing. You looked at our 4x100, 4x400s in track and field. It's just amazing how we
Phenomenal.
keep on performing, and we actually quite, if you look at numbers, we're quite a small nation. We're not a big nation, but our sport people are actually producing the goods, and it's absolutely fantastic.
When you look back at your journey, your incredible journey, I'd like to put it that way as well, Nas, in terms of from schoolboy rugby to Springbok captain. Are there any specific moments that still give you goosebumps?
John, I like to look at it slightly different. I think, and I've said it on a number of occasions, I was extremely fortunate to be surrounded by unbelievable talent. You're talking about talent. I've seen some fantastic rugby players. It's unfortunate that politics did play a part in my era because, there are a number of players that really deserved, and that's from all colours, to play for the Springboks because of the political situation in South Africa. That never happened, and I feel sorry for those guys because if we had on a regular basis tours, we would have seen a number of Springboks that would have been part of the history of South African rugby. Now they're part of South African history, but only through the Currie Cup, and that's sad to say. I was a great believer. You keep politics out of sport, but unfortunately, it's just not possible. But you're talking about moments. I rather would like to say I see every game as a moment, and I don't want to be totally different, if I can put it that way. Uh, I'm not very emotional about it. I was fortunate enough because the only thing we had was the Currie Cup at that stage, and here and there the odd internationals. But as a rugby player, I would say to you, firstly, I think to play against the British and Irish Lions is an achievement because it's only every 12 years. Now, you must know how many people can play brilliant rugby for 10 years but never play against them. I was fortunate enough to do that. When rugby became really part of my life, because I was a little bit more, and I think you know this, a little bit more into baseball at some stages in my life. Um, I thought, to tour New Zealand and play New Zealand in New Zealand must be the highlight of any Springbok. Okay, because at that stage it was a proper rivalry between South Africa and New Zealand. Okay, I was fortunate to do that under very difficult, you know, circumstances, but it was possible, and I did that. And then, you know, I don't think, John, seriously, I don't think I ever played the game to become a Springbok captain. I never had that in the back of my mind. I think in today's era, it's slightly different. In my era, you just play the game because you just liked it, okay, or you loved it, and that was it. So I never had that in mind, and it never really played a major part in my life. I always, tongue in cheek, say I loved being captain because the only thing is you stay alone, okay,
Yeah.
and uh, and I don't have to ask anybody's permission to kick at goal. I think that's about captaincy for me, because if you get to the level, especially international level, and you look at the guys that was around me, a Louis Moelman. What am I going to tell Louis Moelman about playing lock? What am I going to tell him, Piece, the toy, about the front row? Uli Schmidt about hooker, Tien Stoffberg, Gert Small. What am I going to tell him about their positions? Nothing. You know, every guy in his own right was good enough, and I would say good enough to be captain in his position. So that's why the captaincy was never really a major thing. And then, of course, because we only had Currie Cups, to play in a Currie Cup final, to win a Currie Cup final. And John, I was extremely fortunate to play at least in 11 finals. And, drew two, won seven. So in all nine medals. Now, if you go to American football and you talk about a Tom Brady that was unbelievable in American football, and won seven Super Bowls. So he had seven rings. So at least I can say, in my own little world of rugby, I had nine rings. So it's not too bad, John.
Not bad at all. I often think about you. I look back to the 80s and I think of that flower bomb incident there against the All Blacks. I mean, how daunting was that for you? That certainly wouldn't have given you goosebumps, more like fear. How did you deal with that situation, and how did it affect you mentally, Nas?
I think I said to you a little bit earlier, I'm not too emotional about things. That never bothered me. But I saw, I think it's Vessel Westhuizen. He took a picture. I think it's him, okay? Where it's a scrum. And all 14 backline players, all 14, are actually looking up at the sky and the plane that was dropping the flower bombs. So it did play a part. Don't make a mistake. It did play a part. The sad thing about that whole tour wasn't the game that was cancelled in Hamilton. The sad thing was that a referee, through one bad decision, only one, changed a fantastic tour in just a normal tour. Because I still believe it was one of the better sides that I was involved in. Not comparing them to anybody else, but I really believe the best would have been a draw series. But somebody mentioned something the other day, and I never even thought about it. And then thinking about it, I thought, absolutely makes sense. Because if you think how we divided New Zealand, seriously, we divided families because of the tour. Okay. And by winning that series, the guy actually said he spoke to some New Zealanders, and it actually brought New Zealanders together. Now, if that is the case, then I don't mind us not winning that series, because then you can compare that scenario to the one we had in '95 when Francois Pienaar and Kitch Christie and the team won the World Cup for us.
You were known as one of the most strategic fly halves of all time. Where did that rugby intelligence and vision come from?
Difficult to say. I can't pinpoint it. But the thing is, I think I'm going to keep it quite simple in my trying to explain. What do I think is that if you think about it, John, if I'm on the left hand side of the field and I kick crossfield to the right-hand side. Okay. All I had to do was then run to the right touchline. Why? Because you're not really going to catch the ball and kick it back to where I kicked it from. What are you going to do? You're going to just kick it downfield, isn't it? Then people said, oh, you had this feeling, you always knew where the ball was going to go. It wasn't really like that. It was just, I think what I've learned from American football a little bit is that you need to be 2 moves ahead. So it's a little bit, I'm trying to force you
Yes.
to do something that I'm prepared for, to force you to do actually something different. Okay, so I think that's the way I looked at it. I was trying to force you to do something that I can work out my next move. I think
Nice way of
that's
putting it. Yeah,
that's
it
the
sums it up
easiest way
nicely.
to explain it. Yeah, and that's
I
the
know.
easiest.
I noticed wherever I go and your name crops up, people still call you Mr. Rugby Nas. How does that, or what does that title mean to you personally?
Personally, I take it as a compliment. Um, I I believe that you know, John, we need to be a little bit careful because we're in a new era, okay? And there's World Cups. I think any team that can win a World Cup is a brilliant team. Doesn't matter who and what the opposition is. You still have to win the World Cup. So if you go from 87, um, and to be honest, if you ask me, uh, is there anything that you would have liked? I think I would have liked not only me, but the team I was part of then. I think we would have loved to play in '87's World Cup, maybe also a '91 World Cup. But okay, it never worked out that way. But being called Mr. Rugby, it's a compliment, but that's not why I played the game. I just played the game because I loved it. I see it a little bit more, you know, it sounds to me like I actually did my job, what you expected from me. Because that's what I love about rugby. Rugby is a team sport. There's nothing else to it. It's a team sport. Okay. And it just, I think, proved the point that I did my job. As I expected Uli Schmidt to do his job, Christus Pannenberg, Johan Jennes, Raymond. You can just keep naming players and you all know them. Louis Moorman, and we keep going, Donnie Gerber, Thijs Lawrence. Just keep naming them. And
Favorite
it's all
class.
names that you know extremely well.
Yeah,
Kevin de
yeah.
Klerk and, you know, so I look at it and say, okay, at least I did what I was supposed to do for the team, and I think that's vital for me. That's why I said. And then to finish this is to say, you know what? If I just got one or two guys, old people, young people, little boys, whatever, to say because of this, I like the game or I want to play the game, then I actually did my job. That's the way I look at my career. I don't look at it in any different way. And at least when I get somewhere, then there's a lot of people walking up to me, and I love this, John. Walk up to me, and they're a little bit younger than me, put it that way, and they always say, "Can we have your autograph?" And I say, "Yeah, of course." And they will always say, "Oh, it's for my grandma." Then I know, okay. The old ladies still like me, but I think it's only the old ladies that still remembers me, and that's how it is.
Yeah, this is things is ouderdom, not for sissies, eh?
Yeah,
I mean,
no, that's for
I,
sure.
yeah, I
That's
think
for
it is
sure.
very, very modest. But when I look back as well, and I suppose at your career when you decided to go and ply your trade for the Dallas Cowboys in American football, yeah, that must have been a big decision. And did you receive quite a lot of opposition to that decision you made? And in the bigger picture, what really was your main decision for doing that. Besides, obviously being recruited, people realized, wow, this man's got a boot on him, and we need the services of you.
John, I think the decision like that wasn't easy, put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
But I just felt at that stage I needed something else. I needed to do something else. But to just give you a quick background on that, in 81, on our way to New Zealand,
Yeah.
we weren't allowed to go via Australia. Okay, so we had to go via America. And when we played the Chicago Lions, a guy just walked up to me and he said to me, "Wouldn't you like to kick in American football?" And that was it. Okay. And then I got injured in 82. And then the guy phoned again and he said, "Why don't you come and try?" So I sneaked out of the country, to be honest. And, I went for a trial. And at the end, the Cowboys did offer me a contract. And then, it was a big hoorah because I was expelled out of rugby because it's a professional game against an amateur game. But, you know, let's just move on quickly and say, okay, at the end, I was fortunate to be involved in some of the preseason games. But I think, and I'm going to leave it like this, okay? The first game that I played in against the LA Rams was the first game I saw live. So you can imagine. Imagine John Wallen plays tomorrow for the Springboks against France, and that's the first game you see live.
Sure.
That's quite different. And I think a lot of people, you ask me, that I get a little bit of backlash. I think a lot of people wanted me to fail, especially in South Africa. I never looked at it's a failure. If you look at Riz Ahmed, he went. I'm glad he went. He experienced something totally different than rugby, and I think that was absolutely amazing. And yes, people, they still like to say, "Oh, he failed." No, didn't fail at all. I gave it a proper run. I was part of games. I actually played, John. I actually played an American football game. Now, how many South Africans can say that? You know,
Exactly.
that's the way I look at it. And I learned more. Yeah, but I learned more about being a professional than I've ever learned, and I'm still waiting today. I know rugby is now proper professional, but I still believe there are shortcomings that we should address to make rugby a proper professional game. That's one. And secondly, a professional game doesn't mean suddenly you're just getting paid to do something. Okay, you look at American football, coaches, 3, 4 losses in the beginning of the season, they get fired immediately. Players don't perform, they get trade. Have you heard about things like that in rugby? No. So, how professional are we? It's about building a franchise, making it a $1 billion industry, if I can put it that way. And then it's about you get an opportunity, you do your part, and that's it. And if you don't do your part, go and find something else to do. That's what I love about professional sport.
I love what we sort of chatted about briefly at the Gary Player Invitational. There was something that you mooted, which I thought was very, very almost like ahead of its time, but just with your rugby brain, it's something that I reckon could be implemented. Would you sort of care to share that with us? I mean, we know the game has evolved immensely, massively since you're playing the games, and you've seen some big changes as well. Do you kind of think it's for better or for worse, or in terms of what we discussed, maybe elaborate in terms of implementation with all those franchises and how you see it could work?
So, firstly, I'm glad we did, but the foundation started, let's say, with Paul Roos in 1906. Okay, laid the foundation. We were just part of building. Okay, where the guys are today, I think rugby is much better off. It just proves one point. For many, many years, people had an attitude, money will destroy rugby. No, it's not going to destroy rugby if you keep the right structures in place. What I'm still waiting for is to see that rugby absolutely become, like soccer, a global game. Okay. We see now Uruguay, we see Chile, we see Portugal, we see Spain, we see Georgia, but okay, even Belgium now in the playoffs against Namibia. We see smaller countries becoming part of the bigger picture. Okay, so at least we're moving in the right direction. But I think sometimes we're just moving a little bit too slow because I believe that rugby can be like if you take American football, and I always compare rugby to American football. You can't compare the games because it's two different games, okay? But you can at least compare structures, okay? You look at American football, about 32 teams, I think, at the moment, and they're all billion-dollar industries, every single franchise. Now, I would like to see that happen to rugby, that they become billion-dollar industries. It's not about the money. It's about, I want to say, the vision to make rugby such a great sport that we have the same emphasis, if I can put it that way, on rugby than other sports. If you take American basketball, you take American ice hockey, you take American baseball, you take American football. Now, why can't rugby also be like that? Now, I looked at structures. How can we change maybe structures to get to that? Now, I know you need a foundation. Where's your foundation in rugby at the moment? You know, you start at primary school in South Africa, then you go to high school, then you go to under 20 level. Then, if you're good enough, you go into a franchise academy as a youth player, and then you get through the SA Cup, then you go through Currie Cup, then you go through URC, and then maybe if you're good enough, you might become a Springbok. Okay, so that's quite a long pathway. Okay, and let's be fair, not everyone that's playing well at school will always make it in international rugby. Okay, people need to understand that. Parents need to understand. But what we're talking about is how we're going to make the game one of the best in the world. And I was thinking at one stage, what if, and it's not me thinking about it, is that it was on the table. It was on the table that the top 12 international sides play in sort of a league system to build, I want to say, the image of rugby. And then I thought, okay, but, it sounded a fantastic idea. I still think it's a great idea. Okay. But how do you build on it? And maybe the future of rugby will be that somebody will buy the Springboks and somebody else will buy the All Blacks and France and England and Scotland and Wales and Argentina and Italy and Spain and Portugal. And then we will have, I want to say, an international league. And all the structures under that is actually to make sure that that I want to say that franchise getting fed by the best players. Okay, so South Africa will play. Let's say you take the top 12 at the moment. What would be interesting is play home and away. So you play 22 internationals. So that means the national sides, the Springboks, are actually the side in South Africa. And all the other structures is just falling underneath it. Okay. You can still have a URC. You can still have club rugby. You can still have schoolboy rugby. But I think somewhere we need to decide what is professional and what is amateur. There are some structures where I believe they call it professional, where a semi-pro scenario would actually be better. That means you can, like in the old days, you can have a proper job and you can play rugby. If you're good enough, you move up to the next structure.
Icon X 360, where South Africa's sporting icons meet commercial excellence. Welcome back to Beyond the Glory, Naas. Thank you very much for rejoining. And just to continue where we left off in terms of those structures we were talking, I think when we the last words that you uttered were with regard to playing one home game, one away game, something along there, if you could pick up from that side.
I would like to, as it was on the table a couple of years ago with World Rugby, to make it more a little bit about the international scene, if I can put it that way. 12 teams, it might be even more, home and away. It can be 2 divisions. It will give a great opportunity for a Fiji, Samoa, and some of the second-tier teams, Japan and whatever, to play on a regular basis against the top-tier teams. So, I would put it up a notch, if I can put it that way. So your international scene becomes your tier 1 level in rugby, and then underneath that you can go. South Africa, for argument's sake, can go back to a proper Currie Cup system with the club system, with the school system. New Zealand can go NPC. I know you're talking a lot of money because different structures brings different sponsors to the table. And I think they're trying to maximize that, and you can't find fault in that because they have to. But if I look at weekend after weekend when we have international rugby, John, Twickenham is a sellout. Redfield's a sellout. Eden Park's a sellout. Then I look at URC. Average up north, they average about 12 to 15 to 20,000. Back home, and you've been at Ellis Park a couple of times. We get 1,500 plus people at a game. We don't see 20, 25 plus thousand people supporting our franchises. And I would like to see that. I would like to see people turning up at Ellis Park. They do turn up in Durban, in Cape Town, you know that. Loftus, as we know, the crowd, if it goes well, you always will see a lot of people at Loftus. When it's not going too well, then you don't see the people at Loftus. So and I don't have all the answers, and I still think that if World Rugby sit around the table and use a little bit of common sense and figure out what's the best for rugby, not for individuals, but for rugby, then I think there's enough rugby knowledge around the world to get to a structure that's to the benefit of rugby. If you take Australian rugby at the moment, okay, it's not going very well. I thought against the British and Irish Lions, they played well because they had all their talent available. Now, you're looking at, they've always been, let's be fair, a fantastic rugby nation. Suddenly, they're only a good rugby nation if they have all their talent available, all fit, and all available to play against the All Blacks or South Africa. Yes, they do get the odd win, so don't misunderstand me. But it's not like Australia of old. Okay, now how can you actually, I want to say, maximize that you get the best out of it? Because and I know, and that's the irritating thing, is that the international window is only 3 weeks in June and 3 weeks in November. Now, we play Wales at the end of November. and they have to play without their international club players. Now that's where I think it's wrong. I think your international side must take priority. But then the people that's paying the guys to play club rugby is going to turn around and say, "Are you crazy? We're actually paying these guys salary." So that's why I say it's not an easy uh, problem to solve, if I can put it that way. So you have to sit around the table and say, okay, what's the best for the game? Are we going with the structures as now? We play URC, we play Investor Cup, and then the Currie Cup is, you know, and I know, it's trying to find a spot where we can get strength against strength. Okay. If we don't have that, then sponsors aren't really too interested in the Currie Cup. We need the sponsors to be interested because we've got, and we're very fortunate, we've got fantastic youth talent coming through. So they need to go through certain structures. But if you, I want to say, build this pyramid from the top down. I know you always have to build up. You need to have a nice foundation. We have that. We have the Varsity Cup, club rugby. We have that. We have a Currie Cup or a SA Cup. We all have that. Okay, so there are certain things that's really working to our advantage. Okay, but at the end, we need to say what's the most important structure, and I believe the most important structure would be if you build it a little bit from the top down. Make the Springboks priority number one, as it is at the moment. But, you know, it's only because of our attitude. You take New Zealand, for argument's sake. They're not interested in their players playing abroad, or they can't get selected. I'm not saying they're not interested, but they can't get selected. Okay, so it's a little bit of a difficult scenario. So what do we want? We want, when the top teams play each other, every single player that's fit to be involved in that game. And you know, and I know that that is not happening at the moment. So you see the structures. We keep talking about structures. So somewhere we need a one season. We need to say, okay, if Northern Hemisphere, as we all know, they're sort of running rugby. Okay, Southern Hemisphere, they don't really like to say, yeah, but it is. Okay, if the season starts then in August or September, it finishes in May or June. So the players get a proper break. But in that whole season, you fit in everything that you need. Okay. If it's the Southern Hemisphere taking the lead, then you start in end of February, you finish in end of September, October. Okay. You see where I'm going with it? Because then you fit it all in and you're making sure everything works. But at the moment, you know, it's just money going out. We just have to employ, if I can put it that way, more players because there's more competitions that you have to play in. I would like to say any team would like to play in a competition, not to participate, but to win. But it's impossible because you've got URC, you've got Investor Cup, then somewhere along the line the Currie Cup comes in, then of course you have your international players that's not available. You take Leinster. They came to South Africa with a B team. They lost 2 games badly. That's not fair to the franchise. That's absolutely not fair to the franchise. Why? Because the international players were on the tour, they're not available. The same happens when we just have a nice attitude in South Africa because the Springboks are the number one and we all work together to make sure they keep on winning. But other countries, their players play abroad and those clubs or club owners say, sorry, you're not available. You play for my club on that specific weekend. So you see how it's actually sounding like a little bit of a horror movie at the moment. And rugby shouldn't be a horror movie. It should be fun. It should be well structured. And we need to decide what is the best for the game. And at the moment, there's too many questions unanswered.
In the bigger picture, what you've mooted certainly will have a lot of people listening and thinking that this makes sense. But there might also be those who would want to rebut it as well. Do you kind of, have you, when you've discussed this, I know that you would take it to a new level, Nas, a higher level, but has it been received with a lot of positivity? Because it really does, in my opinion, seem to make sense.
I haven't really discussed it with a lot of people. We just spoke about it
Yeah.
like, we just had a rugby chat, put it that way. And the thing is, I think, if you take when New Zealand wanted to get a investor into New Zealand rugby, how the ex-players had quite a big say about it. And, it's got nothing to do with ex-players. You know, we had our time. We part of the past. Rugby needs to move on, and it needs to move on in the best way forward. And that's what irritates me is that you know just get the guys that's involved now. Okay, sit them around the table and say, okay, forget yourself for a moment. Your part in rugby, how important you feel to cup a team. Just to put a little cup on his head. Okay. Forget all that. What's the best for rugby going forward? If we can just change one attitude, just one. I would like to talk about the next World Cup. There's a possibility of 8 teams maybe winning the World Cup. You know, and I know that's not going to happen. We're talking about 4, maybe 5 teams that can win a World Cup. And that's it. Nobody else. You talk South Africa, France, New Zealand. Australia is struggling, but we've seen, and that's why I say rugby is a funny sport, okay? You talk 2 years before 2019, we were in the doldrums, South Africa. Rassie came in, changed a little bit of an attitude, changed a little bit of the structures, and we won the World Cup in 2019. And we repeat that in 2023. So in 2 years, a lot of things can happen. Australia can turn their rugby upside down. They can actually go in and they're staging the next World Cup and actually win the World Cup. That's totally possible because sport is really that old saying, you're only as good as your last game. Okay. Things can change in 7 days. You've seen it and I've seen it. You beat the Cavaliers in one Saturday, next Saturday you lose, next Saturday you win again. So you go from 0 to 0 in no time. Okay, that's just sport. That's the way it works. But I seriously think we're not there where every decision we make is for the better of the game. And I think we seriously need to readdress that. And some people that feel they extremely important playing a part in rugby at the moment, maybe they should just step aside and let the whole reason why we're having a chat is to say what's the best for the game. And if I must step aside for the better of the game, then just do that, you know. But unfortunately, I don't think that's going to happen in my lifetime.
Interesting, Nas. How do you sort of view the current Springbok era under Rassie Erasmus and Siya Kolisi?
John, we at an unbelievable, I want to say, space at the moment because we've got so much talent coming through. We've got, and we're very fortunate to have a very well organized school structure. As I mentioned earlier, not every schoolboy makes it at the end. We all know that. Okay. But it's amazing the talent we have. And we're very fortunate because the thing is, there are certain teams that's actually grooming players to go to a higher level. Okay, and when they get to a high level, let's be honest, Rassie is getting something out of this team that I don't think too many coaches around the world can do. I think some coaches became great coaches because they had great teams. I think Rassie took a Springbok team that was really under pressure, performance-wise, and we won our 2 World Cups in a row. I think it is possible for this team under his leadership to win another one. I really do. And, it's just the way he gets everybody believing in systems. Now, we all know not all players, you know, might be happy because you would like to be part of the starting 15. And we've got talent in some positions where I want to say you're fortunate if you start, but the pressure is on. You do your side of the job, and I think that's where Rassie is actually extremely fair. He gives you an opportunity, you use that opportunity, he plays you again. You use that opportunity again, then suddenly you're the man. That's what you want as a player from a coach, and he's doing that. He's giving the guys, but he's also not excluding the guys in the bigger picture. And that's where I think the players, some players feel maybe I can start, or all players should actually feel I should be in the starting lineup. That's why you play the game, to be the best. But at some stages, somebody else is just a little bit better at some stages. And then just accept that. Work a little bit harder. And, when you get the opportunity, take the opportunity. But I think we're in a great place at the moment, John. We're getting results week in and week out. And I must say, I think that's what I love about the Springboks. We're not talking about other countries, okay? We're talking about the Springboks. What I love about our attitude is we want to win every single international we play. And that's the way it should be. You've seen in the past, and that irritated me, is that, teams tour from the Northern Hemisphere in June, July, and they sort of send their second string because the guys had a long season, they need a break, they need to rest. I do understand that. You need to look at players' welfare, absolutely. But what I love about the Southern Hemisphere, we have an attitude when we go up north. We want to go and beat them on a regular basis. And I love that. I just absolutely love that. And I don't always feel the same coming from north to south. But it doesn't matter. What do you play? You play what's on the other side. It's like coaches, some coaches come and say, yeah, but I selected the young side. Nobody said you must select the young side. You can select whoever you want. So don't hide behind the reason, oh, I selected the young side. You've decided on that given day that young side's the best 15 rugby players for your nation. And then if you get 40 points, don't complain later, because we're not 2 years old. We're not going to believe you. Okay? And then, so that's why I say lovely rugby is a lovely game to talk about. There's so many things going on about the rugby, but I still think a little bit of common sense, one season is a must. Is a must. Player welfare is a must. Okay? So let's sort that out first. And everybody needs to buy in this. And even, we spoke about it, and I see Rassie also mentioned it the other day. If that means we play the rugby championship when they play the Six Nations, then we do that. But then you hear from the Northern Hemisphere, yeah, but then it's taking the shine away from the Six Nations. It's such a institute in the rugby, and then they might lose sponsors. You see where it's all going, John? We keep saying the same thing. It's going about self entitlement instead of rugby. And that's the irritating thing.
I love what you say. The Springbok jersey carries enormous pride and pressure as you know. What did it mean for you to wear it, Nas?
I thought it was just absolutely fantastic because on a given day, imagine this, John, on a given day, okay, in my days, I think we were about 45 to 50 million people. We're a little bit more now. But on a given day, it's the same as playing for the Proteas, same as Bafana, same as the netball Proteas, whatever. On that day, you're one of the 15 best players out of 50 million people. Not 50 million people play rugby, but I mean, you represent 50 million people and you're one of 15 of the best players. So that's quite an achievement. But, you know, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed playing with, like I mentioned to you on a number of occasions, absolutely amazing talent. And but I would rather like to talk about how we're going to take this game to the next level.
Yeah, and how are we going to take the game to the next level?
Common sense, John. Common sense.
Like that. And let's hope that common sense prevails, Nas. That's for sure. Eh?
Yeah,
Do you
let's
see
hope.
do you see any modern day players? I've often wondered. Do you see any modern day players that kind of remind you of yourself in terms of style or even mindset?
John, I think it's totally different eras. You know, we had to work and then you had, you know, I worked out the other night on a Monday, an hour and a half, because we spoke about captaincy, okay? Did a captain play a major role in my days than now? No, I don't think so. Because why? You saw the guys for an hour and a half on a Monday. Then on the Wednesday, the same, an hour on the Thursday. Maybe Friday night in a hotel, then Saturday play. Sunday you break up again. Where today it's totally different. I think a captain plays a bigger role in today's. Why? Because you 5 weeks away from home. It's a job. You see each other from, I want to say, 6 in the morning till 6, 7 at night. So a captain definitely plays a different role than in my days. That's why I say you can't compare eras to other eras. It just can't. It's absolutely impossible. But as I mentioned earlier, I think rugby is better off today. Money plays a part with some players. I don't think with all players. Some guys, sign one contract actually to start thinking about another contract and then another contract where, it should be, I sign a contract to do my utter best for the one contract I have. But we all know that's new generation. We've got younger mentalities coming through. Your lifespan in rugby, I think, is a little bit shorter. Sometimes I ask the question, don't we have too many professional rugby players? Because at some games you look at and think, is this really a professional rugby player? But it's not for me to make those decisions. That's why I say, we need a little bit more, I want to say a little bit more structure, organized structures that actually make sense for the game. You hear me coming back the whole time talking about the
Structures.
game.
Yeah, the game.
It's
Yeah.
not about me. It's not about you. It's not about somebody else. What is the game about? The game is about the players and the coach. Now let's see if we can get a structure in place that actually serves that, because then we're on the right path. But if we have, I want to say, some officials playing a major role, and of course we need officials. Of course we need a franchise to have all this, all that. But what's your nucleus of the business? It's rugby, and as long as rugby is taking the important role in life today, then we're on the right track. But if that is not the number one, then we're not on the right track. Now, I'm not saying we're on the wrong track. I'm not saying we're on the right track. I just ask questions as you do. You have how many interviews on a daily basis with different sporting codes and all this and all that? Is there a water tight system that works. No, but we can change a little bit, I believe. But maybe rugby, because this whole 12-month seasons aren't working at the moment. We put too much strain on the players, and there's not enough proper guidance to make sure that we get the best for the game at the moment.
What would you say is the one lesson rugby taught you that still guides you through your life today?
Discipline, discipline. There's nothing else. There's nothing more important than discipline. Faith and, confidence and all this. It all starts with discipline. Think about this, John. The two of us play for the Boks.
Yes.
Okay. And we turn up 10 minutes late. Think about that. But you and I might turn up 10 minutes late for a meeting. It doesn't work like that. That's why I say there's one thing in life that I can take out of rugby, and that's discipline. If you have discipline, you can go anywhere in the world. Yeah.
That is so true. I mean, what advice would you give to young South Africans as well, Nas? I know this has been a long podcast. It's been awesome. We could chat all day. It's just so fascinating listening to you. I know you've got other duties and other commitments as well, but thank you for this time. But what advice would you give basically to young up-and-coming South Africans chasing success in any field, not just in rugby?
For youngsters, I would like to say the following. You don't need to move to special schools rugby-wise to become a Springbok. If you're good enough, you will make it. But the one thing you need to make a decision on is, if you decide you want to make it, then you can make it. You're the only one. Sometimes, and we've seen it in the past, some great players didn't make it. Why? Because they were at the wrong place at the wrong time. Coach might have said, no, but Nas is too small. I can't use him. And I say, it's not an easy ride. Understand that. It's not an easy ride. If you do get an opportunity, take that opportunity, because there might not be another opportunity. And I see that a little bit with the youngsters at the moment. I think, this week is fine. We'll play next week. Okay. There might not be a next week. And then also, as you ask me, what did I take out of rugby or out of life? Discipline. I don't think the youngsters is as disciplined as they should be. Without discipline, you're not going to get anywhere. If you don't turn up for training, Gordon has got a nice saying. She always says, whatever you put in, you get out. Now, if you don't rock up for training, okay, there's no magic wonder that's going to fly over you and suddenly make you great on that Saturday. It doesn't work like that. And I think sometimes they underestimate their own discipline. I was involved with the school, then guys didn't turn up at training. And I would ask them, I would say, where were you? Oh, no, I overslept. 4 o'clock in the afternoon, John.
Sure.
4 o'clock in the afternoon. Yeah. That's discipline. Okay. Yeah. Attitude. They're a little bit entitled. Fine. I don't mind if you're entitled. I don't mind if you expect to be the best in the world, or you think you're the best in the world. Go and prove to everybody else you are the best in the world. Go and prove to your coach you are the best. Then he will select you. But sometimes the brain says, I am the best in the world. But if I look at you on the field, you're not. So that's the reality. And to be great at age 12 doesn't mean you're going to become a Springbok. Okay? I see, and I keep telling people, primary school, high school, Varsity Cup, under 20s, Currie Cup, URC, whatever, it's only a stepping stone. It's only a stepping stone to get to the national side. And the one day when you put on that green and gold jersey, then you know I made it. Okay? And not everybody is going to make it. If you take, we're fortunate, we've got 3 great fly-offs at the moment. Okay? Great fly-offs. Now, let's say they stick around for 10 years, those 3. Okay? Which other fly-offs are going to play for South Africa? See, John, that's the harsh reality. So if you're playing Springbok at the moment, if you play rugby at the moment and you're playing fly-off, I think you might, if with Sasha, Andre, and Mani, you might go and find another position. We're not an individual sport. Golf is easy.
Yeah.
It's you hitting the ball.
Exactly.
Okay, nobody else is hitting the ball. You hitting the ball. Athletics, it's easy. So I always say, Carter, you jumps the furthest. That's it. Okay, you're number 1. I'm number 2. That's how it works. Rugby is a team sport, but unfortunately, same as in cricket. If you get a Jacques Kallis playing for 15 years for the Proteas, if you're in that position, or you wanted to bat number 3, I think go and bat number 4, 5, or 6, because for 15 years you're not going to play for the Proteas, or Herschel Gibbs, or Graeme Smith, or Sean Pollock. If you think you're a great bowler, but he's going to play for 12 years, 15 years, 17 years for South Africa, you're not going to make it. That's why life's not an easy ride, John.
Oh, that's so true, Nas. And we could go on for hours. I just want to ask you something which I thought would resonate very well with you. Through the decades, the story of yourself is told from decades from now, of course, because it will be decades, of course, from now that people still talk about you. How do you hope people will remember you?
I actually did my job. I did my part for the team to be successful. That's all. Nothing else. I don't want to be compared to anybody else. I never had an attitude of playing the game to be called the best ever, because you can't compare Hans Brewers to a guy in the 60s, to a guy in the 80s, to a guy in 2000, and to a guy in 2025. You just can't. I know everybody loves to do that and say, oh, this is the best guy. Oh, that's the best guy. Look at your career and say, did I do my job? And if the answer is yes, then you should feel satisfied. Remember the other guy, it's only an opinion. If somebody says, I was the best, it's only his opinion, John. Another guy's got another opinion. So you just take it from who it comes. Yeah, that's why I say, look at your career and say, did I do my job? And it sounds to me, I did. So I'm quite happy where I am.
Hey, Nas, we've gone into extra time here. It's been absolutely fantastic chatting to you on Beyond the Glory. Thank you for giving us up your valuable time. To your lovely wife, Karen, your wonderful family and friends, may you continue to go from strength to strength in all your endeavors. It's been an absolute honor and a pleasure to chat to you. Everything of the best, Nas. Thank you very much for your time and for your insightfulness in, no doubt, inspiring and motivating many others in years to come. Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks, John. I really appreciate it.
Catch more conversations with sporting greats on band.link/Beyond Glory.